Welcome back to another episode at Scrap Mechanic Labs. I am your host, Chief Engineer, and I am wishing you a happy new year, and thanks for coming back and seeing me. We're going to be going over some really important pro building concepts here. Two we're going to focus on mainly. The third thing is going to be rapid prototyping, which I'll be demonstrating, but the main things are something I'm calling ballast vectoring, and the other thing is symmetrical balancing. Now, if you get these two concepts down good, you'll be able to build on a small scale really effectively and be able to accomplish things with blocks you probably didn't know was possible till now. So stick around. This is going to be a really good episode, and we're going to be going into some pretty advanced concepts. So do you think you're ready for it? To join me, Chief, on this adventure? Wiggle, 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 wiggle. And enjoy. Start off the new year, 2018, with a blast, with some awesome concepts. Wiggle, 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 wiggle. Let's do it. Let's do it after this little commercial break.
Why?
Boom, chicka boom, boom, boom. All right, we're back from our commercial break, and I'm gonna address a problem. This is a problem many of us have had to deal with, and we've skirted it, we've tried to work our way around it, but until a friend of mine showed me a fairly simple solution, I had struggled with this for a long time now. The thruster is our main vanilla form of thrust, alright, for getting into the air that doesn't involve propulsion like with wheels, which keep you pretty much land-based. Now, thrusters are great. You could throw them on any vehicle, do anything you want, but the smaller a vehicle you're trying to design, the more tricky it becomes to ballast the balance of the vehicle, because I'll give you an example. The thruster here, alright, is a 4x4 block. To use it in a very small build means you have to scale the build 4x4. So if you want front and back or lateral or rotation or all these types of things, you end up having to use a lot of these 4x4 by 2 by 4 size objects, and it just makes building small harder. Now you're probably saying, Chief, what is this obsession you have with building small? Why do you need to build small all the time? In a community environment, small facilitates sharing more of the workload of the main machine with more people, more fun, more friends, more party, more action, yabba dabba do. It's what I like to do. But this wasn't a problem that couldn't be addressed without a little bit of thought. This new part, I made it the basis for my UFO, and as you saw me playing around during the opening statements, I discovered through playing with the UFO that you could do something that's called ballast vectoring. So when you take off in the UFO, you can have thrusters, and you can make those thrusters vector simply by changing the shape of it and pushing the vehicle's mass around using just a bearing connecting the top dish to the bottom dish off center. That's what causes that little bit of movement there, which adjusts the mass. This was great for building a vehicle that I could slide left and right with, and with the two smaller thrusters I could angle it forward and back. But that's all the control I really had on it. And this was also required mods for me to work on something this small. I like the idea, but I wanted to move forward on this and do something with a bit more control and more utility for it. So that brought me on to this design here. Said, I know I'm not vanilla, I'm still not vanilla in this design, but now I'm shifting 2 platforms over left and right, and it weight shifts, and I thought, okay, let me try to scale this. And that's when this design came along. Now this design, a friend of mine, a genius, showed me that you can use what he called using a 45-degree angle to balance out something along this plane of the vehicle. Now this really impressed me, because this could give me a type of control, right? I could use weight shifting for strafing, and I could adjust the power to one of the rear thrusters or one of the front thrusters, and using 2 of the thrusters to give me a stabilized lift. And what I mean by stabilized, I don't mean like actually stabilized with a stabilizer, I just mean the lift is equally distributed to give me a vertical lift. This was incredibly difficult to fly, and it was the first lesson through my rapid prototyping sessions that I go through. Now, rapid prototyping means building small. You'll be able to learn more, and you'll be able to go through multiple phases with quicker turnaround by building small. You could, if you solve these problems on a smaller scale, they scale up nicely. So let me give a demonstration of how this type of symmetrical balancing works when you're building a 2x2 object, which is 2x2, which is the thruster, the base of the thruster, the attachment point, onto something that is an uneven number like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is a 7x7 dish. I'm trying to weight balance it better with an even number of blocks object. So you just place a bearing, place your thruster on the bearing, place your thruster on the bearing like that. Connect your controller, and then just 45 them. 45 them the other way. Okay, now you've got these 2 thrusters in line, at least along one axis here. So now the weight distribution of the thrusters isn't causing it to fall this way or this way. It'll be in line this way along the vehicle. As a matter of fact, I could balance it even better along the dish, I think. If I move the thruster there, because see, that tips right there. Put the corner of the thruster there. Connect that bearing, controller, 45 it, and reverse that bearing. And no, it doesn't look like we could perfectly load balance it along the middle, or can we? I think we can. I'm not giving up on this idea. That puts a bearing there. Let's put this thruster there. Let's 45 it. See if we can get it perfectly symmetrical. Okay. Now this was the basis for one of my further down the line systems. But for now, you can see how we have 2 thrusters, alright, that we can balance along a certain axis of this dish. This is really important to be able to do because it's going to lead, we're going to build upon these ideas as we move forward. So by 45 degreeing them, you could create an inline structure like this, all right? And at least along one axis, distribute the weight really evenly on your vehicle. Let's move on to the next vehicle. This was too unstable. The thrusters too far out from the center of mass of the vehicle made controlling it extremely difficult. So what did we do? We tightened up the thrusters into sort of an array here in the middle. But we still had some problems, and I'll show you what those problems were, with some spacing here. Now, this forward and back thruster was clipping a little bit on the dish, and I didn't get it squared up the way I liked it. It's hard to tell. It's not showing it so bad now, but you could see it. You could kind of see it. So, scrap this model, put some spacers in. Now, my 4 thrusters are aligned at this angle. Now, mind you, this could be visually deceiving because you could align 4 thrusters on a dish like this, but I used bearings to align them and rotate them, all 4 of them, 45 degrees, so that I could get an inline control of the system where I have a thruster on the left side, right side, and the forward and the back of the vehicle, while being able to protrude my attachments here for the base dish where I put my 2 seats on. So design wise, we're making progress. We've got a pretty well weight distributed vehicle that is almost perfectly balanced, and to strife left and right we do what I call ballast vectoring, which doing a little push like that with steering, adjusting that, ballast to the right, ballast to the left, and no thrust is required for this. It's just a weight shift of the vehicle that gives me that type of movement, and there's no stabilization aside from it just being a perfectly balanced vehicle. Another question probably ask, it's so much easier to just weld a stabilizer on. Why don't you just do that, Chief? Let me answer that question. All stabilizers do is they use, in my opinion, a collision type interaction. This constant collision type interaction is a drag on your system. It's slow. It's something extra that you have to have the game constantly processing in the background. I just don't like the idea of merged blocks in that way. It's not what the developers had designed. Each block needs to occupy its own space. And by using stabilization systems to force blocks into one another, you're just creating more of an opportunity to crash or break your game. You're inherently introducing instability to the game, and I want my game to run as stable as possible. So using other systems is more important to me. Now stabilizing the vehicle just through weight distribution, really important to me. Smaller the vehicle, easier it is to do that. Smaller the vehicle, the less of a client side burden you'll be for the servers you enjoy playing on with your friends. So just nothing but bonuses, guys, when you do it this way. But this brings me back to this idea here where you're balancing using 45 degrees. Now, you can balance something along the horizontal, right, like this, but there's more than one plane of horizontal. There's also this plane of horizontal And then there's also other objects that are along this plane that you want to weight balance to. And that's where we'll move on to my final literation so far. Or I guess iteration. I have a habit of saying it's this grand literary piece. No, it's iteration. What I did here was I took 45ing to the next step. This thruster here is, I believe it's 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks long, if I'm not mistaken. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? But to balance something 4 along something that is an uneven number, which is the span of the dish, which is 7 blocks, means I had to shift it back 45 degrees, then move it forward, and then to keep it in line with the size of the ship, which is also an uneven number, I had to rotate the thruster 45 degrees. So all this was a way to redistribute weight and balance, to symmetrically balance the weight distribution of the vehicle along the X, the Y, and the only one I didn't really have to, but even the Z axis, it was too heavy on one side. Yeah, this is balanced along so many different ways just to avoid stabilization and having to use stabilization glitches. Another reason why it's balanced this way is because I kept it all vanilla with vanilla parts too. These additional blocks here are just some glass blocks that I used to balance out some of the extra piping that was on this side. So just 2 glass blocks balanced out all the piping here, and that was pretty easy to work out. Now, as for this vehicle, it was a blast. My Sky Cycle. Once I got it perfected, I was really happy with it. And I'll give you a demonstration of how it flies along. But if you take away anything from this, it's the introduction of ballast vectoring along with symmetrical balancing, and you can build a very fluid vehicle that takes off, and you have a strife component which allows you to move to the right or to the left, and by using the front button, I could tilt the vehicle back, which is my 2 button. If I use the back button, I could tilt it forward, and if I use my 4 or 5 buttons, I could rotate the vehicle around, and if I use 4 and 5 at the same time, I could give myself a nice forward thrust like this. Woo! But this thing is amazing to fly. It feels like a real kind of spaceship kind of thing. So, let me bring myself back to the landing pod over there. Let me bring it in for a landing. Ooh. Perfect. Hey, I got where I wanted to go. Came in a little hot, but you know what? Fun build. A great example of how you could balance out something small using using a bunch of using a lot of 45-degree angling. Here are all my 45-degree angled little parts that brought everything into a balanced state on this vehicle. So, yep, it was probably a pretty long-winded explanation, but I covered a few things. We went through the rapid prototyping phases of the vehicles. We went through a little example of how using 45 degrees can balance stuff out along odd number blocks, so you can get the weight distribution just right with what you're trying to do. And I just had a blast doing this. Thanks for sticking around with me and checking out the video. If you liked it, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe if you've been checking me out. So, I was your host, Chief Engineer. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I have a great 2018, and we'll be back doing some more community time, some more fun projects, more streaming on Twitch. Lots of streaming on Twitch. And, let's wrap this up. I got work to do. I got stuff to edit. Adios. Cookie, you in the chat? Can you tell me what it is that you guys do for the new year to celebrate? What do you guys do? You guys do fireworks? Oh, how many of you guys do fireworks for New Year's? You go out and you do some fireworks. Huh? That sounds fun. Kerman says he does fireworks for New Year's. You know what I do for New Year's? I eat grapes. We eat one grape for every month of the year. We eat a grape.
So 12.
So I have to eat 12 grapes, and sometimes we get sparkling. Sometimes we get that sparkle. Yes, sometimes we'll do sparkling grape juice too, and we'll get snacks. And that's when I do it with the family, but I've always had to work on New Year, so I don't get to do that with them. But I'll get home, and if there are grapes there, I will eat 12 grapes to commemorate each month of the year with a grape. Do any of you guys have any interesting... Oh, look, you're already setting off fireworks.
Whoa!
Look, Kerman is already doing the fireworks for New Year's. Kerman, you gotta wait till midnight, Kerman. That is when you do it.